Imagine selling a house where the flood insurance is literally $7,000 a year. I've never experienced it before this transaction in Trenton. So, to give you a little backstory on how this whole chaotic situation went, I've had this home listed since May. Not because I'm a bad agent or because people didn't want to buy it, but for a few different crazy reasons. So, the first buyer went under contract right around the June timeframe. We had it listed May, took a couple weeks because of the flood insurance, and I'll explain it. But the buyer was under contract, set to close in 2 weeks. Lender didn't even know about the flood insurance. Isn't that wonderful when the buyer's agent doesn't even notify anybody about the flood insurance? So, buyer couldn't get the home because the flood insurance was so high. We had multiple quotes. We had 6,000, we had 7,000. Finally, I was able to find someone that was willing to do it for $4,000, which is still outrageous. But again, they still couldn't get the home. Second buyer, actually, home goes back on the market after a little bit of back and forth talk with the sellers. Second buyer goes under contract. The lender on this buyer would not tell me anything if we had a mortgage commitment, which usually means that the buyer is able to obtain the mortgage. They also wouldn't tell me if we were in the realm for closing. Nothing. They literally would say, "We don't represent you. We can't tell you anything." Only to find out a week before closing, the buyer couldn't get a mortgage. And still to this day, I do not know why. So I stepped in, and what I did was I took this buyer and the agent and I brought them to my preferred lender right here in Haddonfield. And the end result was about 30 to 45 days later, the buyer was ready to close. But the story gets crazier. So I'm trying to keep it short, but this story just goes on and on. So now we're probably in the October timeframe. This was drawn out for months. We had to find a second buyer, and then we found the second buyer. Their financing fell through after 45-ish days. The timeline goes on. So buyer number two, which went under the contract 3 times because the third time was with my lender, when they got to the closing table, 24 hours before, the sellers that were selling them this home decided we don't want to sell it anymore because their housing plans fell through. It created a huge tailspin. So the buyers were then sitting there 24 hours later at the closing. Sellers didn't show up. They said, "We're not selling." Obviously, there's some legal ramifications there when you do things like that. That's probably another story. Having said that, we ended up finally agreeing a week and a half later for the seller to sell them the home and do a lease back. So all in all, this transaction took about 6 months to close from start to finish. It was the flood insurance. It was 2 different buyers going under contract. It was the sellers on the 11th hour deciding they didn't want to sell the home anymore. I don't know if I have any gray hair from this, but if I don't, I'd be surprised. But this was probably the craziest transaction I've ever had in my entire career. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for making it to the end of the video. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and please leave a comment below. And if you like this video, you might like this one right up here. Don't forget to subscribe.